have you ever actually stopped to think about the massive daily cognitive labor you put in as an infant? I mean, you worked every single day. You fell literally hundreds of times just trying to figure out how to walk, pulling yourself up on furniture, probably screaming at the absolute indignity of it all. And yet, the completely bizarre reality here is that your brain recalls absolutely none of it. The entire conscious record of that experience is just gone.
Okay, let's dive into this. Where did your entire early childhood actually go? Most people, they just shrug it off and say, well, babies just don't remember stuff. But that kind of frames early childhood as this totally empty period, when in reality, it was a meticulously documented event, but the mental files were somehow systematically destroyed. You weren't just skipping a chapter, you were there, but the record was wiped clean.
Part 1. The Missing Memory Mystery. A formal investigation into our vanished past.
Forgetting your infancy isn't just like, forgetting where you left your keys. It's the total erasure of a conscious, experiencing, and feeling human being. The scientific community has an official term for this whole thing: infantile amnesia. Now, psychologists have known about this for over a century. Sigmund Freud initially wrote about it and, characteristically blamed it on repression. But modern science points to a much more mechanical and honestly a way more fascinating explanation that's tied to the biology of our developing brains. Part 2. The myth of passive babies. To really get into the biology, we first gotta bust a really common misconception: the myth that infant brains are just passive blobs, merely responding to basic stimuli. The reality is quite the opposite, actually. Your brain during infancy was extraordinarily busy. You were essentially a one-person research department, putting in real, intense, daily cognitive labor. You were constantly learning, figuring out that faces signal safety, that certain sounds mean food is coming, or that if you just cry at 3 a.m., an entire adult will magically materialize in the room. Let's move to and see how this builds into concrete scientific proof. Back in the 1980s, researcher Carolyn Rovi Collier ran this really famous series of experiments. Infants as young as 2 months old were introduced to a mobile over their crib. On day 1, they quickly learned that kicking their legs made the mobile move. And crucially, days later, they retained this association and just started kicking immediately. They were actively learning, right? They were forming memories. The data was absolutely going in. In fact, your brain was arguably almost too active. By the time you were 2 years old, your brain had roughly twice as many synaptic connections as it would eventually keep as an adult. Neural connections were just forming at this absurd, totally unsustainable speed. So the true absurdity of human development is essentially this. You spent months compiling data on reality, putting in all this intense work. It's literally exactly like writing a massive research paper in a Google Doc, and then just closing the tab without saving. The IT department of your infant brain took meticulous notes, and then someone just wiped the server completely. Why on earth would our biology do that? Part 3. The biological memory wipe. Our goal here is to create a clear overview of the biological causes behind our lack of early memories, and our very first biological suspect is the hippocampus hardware problem. See, the hippocampus is the brain region most responsible for converting experiences into long-term memory, and during those first years of life, its architecture simply isn't finished yet. It's still structurally developing. But wait, that doesn't actually solve the whole mystery. 3- and 4-year-olds absolutely do form vivid memories in the moment. Ask a 4-year-old about their birthday party, and they'll give you a highly detailed review of the cake. Yet you check back in 20 years, and that vivid memory is completely gone. So the hardware being a bit immature, that only takes us so far. The real missing piece of the biological puzzle is neurogenesis. This is the process of the brain generating new neurons. And in early childhood, it happens at an extremely high rate right there in the hippocampus. A landmark 2014 study actually found evidence suggesting that this massive surge of new neurons actively interferes with previously stored memories. And this brilliantly illustrates what's going on. Early childhood is quite literally like constructing an entire city while simultaneously demolishing half the streets right behind you. The massive new neural growth physically rewires the very circuits that are holding your old memories in place, basically causing those old memories to degrade. The very biological process that was making you smarter, building your future mind, was actively overwriting your past. Part 4. The missing protagonist. Okay, so we've looked at the biological hardware, but we also really have to look at the psychological software. To hold on to an autobiographical memory, you need a few key things. We just talked about the mature hippocampus, but you also need a developed sense of self, and language. Think about it for a second. To hold a memory of yourself in a scene, you have to implicitly register the thought, this happened to me. But babies do not arrive in the world with a built-in concept of me.
Let's look at the famous mirror test. If you take a dot of rouge, put it on a baby's nose, and show them a mirror, infants under 18 months will reach outward toward the mirror itself. They literally don't register that the reflection is them. It's not until roughly 18 to 24 months that they realize it and reach toward their own nose, showing that they are actively consolidating a sense of self. Before that point, there is quite literally no protagonist for the memory to belong to.
And then there's the language barrier. Simply put, no language means no retrieval path. The way we encode and later retrieve autobiographical memories is deeply, deeply entangled with our ability to narrate them. You need an internal voice to give an experience a sequence, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Without language, even the memories that do manage to survive that biological wipe have no internal address to point to when you go looking for them later. Part 5. The invisible imprints left. So, if the conscious memories are wiped clean by neurogenesis and a lack of language, what actually happens to all that emotional data you collected? Let's walk through the process. First, an early experience triggers a profound feeling of either unease or safety. Second, your body and your developing nervous system save that reaction pattern. Third, as we just learned, the conscious memory of the specific event is erased by neurogenesis overwriting those circuits. But step 4 is where it gets totally wild. The emotional instinct remains in you, the adult. Your basic sense of safety, your attachment patterns, your subtle fears, they were all built and retained long after the specific events were completely forgotten. So the crucial point is this. The explanation and the specific event are erased, but the emotional reaction and the instinct are saved permanently. Imagine waking up feeling anxious when someone seems distant, or finding that a certain environment feels emotionally loaded for literally no obvious reason. You carry these invisible imprints without ever knowing their origin. Your conscious memory is really just a tiny visible layer sitting on top of vast systems trained long before you even had words to describe them.
It is beautifully unsettling to realize that who you are today was partly shaped by a version of yourself you'll never actually get to meet. An enormous chunk of your mind, your personality, and exactly how you relate to other people, well, that was built before anyone was fully there to witness its construction. You really have no idea what that baby went through to eventually become the person sitting here watching this explainer today.
I want to leave you with this lingering, pretty provocative thought. What invisible imprints is your forgotten baby self still leaving on you today? Take a moment to just reflect on these silent emotional foundations operating just beneath your conscious awareness. It completely changes how you view your own mind, doesn't it? Thanks for learning with me on The Explainer today, and keep exploring the amazing mechanics behind exactly who you are.